If the beam turns red, I do not look outside from the lantern room. 6 years in Army security taught me that most hauntings are broken routines wearing human faces. And for the first part of that night, I tried to treat the red beam the same way. I was 34, on a civilian lighthouse contract off Cabell Bay, and the older relief keeper was trying to sleep one level below me until dawn handoff. I had once stared at a clean log while another man paid for my mistake. I was not going to do that again. At 1:27 a.m. Thursday, breakwater light stood alone in fog so dense it made the glass feel buried. My performance plan ended at dawn. One more violation would have ended the contract. That mattered. The man downstairs mattered more. The glass threw a red band into the fog like somebody dragged a fresh bruise through the air. My stomach tightened because that color did not come from any filter I maintained. A lighthouse can lie, and the ocean believes it. The desk in the service room held the shift binder under a mug ring and a crust of salt grit. Its spine cracked in 2 places from being folded back over the same pages too many times. The front sticker had peeled enough to show an older mark beneath it, a faint L6 stamp, almost eaten away by time. The first page had one line underlined so hard it cut the paper. When the beam turns red, do not look outside. Below it, bolt the iron shutters. Keep eyes to the floor. Farther down, in a different hand and lighter ink, a note rode the edge of the page like an afterthought that had outlived the official text. The lamp housing has a manual stop lever. Use only when the light becomes a hazard. That line should have sounded like ordinary maintenance language. It did not. It sounded like somebody had learned it the expensive way. The last time I told myself an ugly report was just a bad sensor, I was working a perimeter gate on another kind of post. The alarm tripped in the same 5-minute window 3 nights running. I called it drift, killed the sensor on night 3, and by dawn there was an ambulance where the gate should have been empty. No ghosts in that story, just my judgment, a clean log, and a man who paid for my need to feel rational. Since then, I trusted routine. I did not trust clean paperwork. The relief keeper downstairs had a smoker's cough he tried to hide behind dry humor and menthol gum. On cold mornings, he took the stairs with one hand on the rail and the other pressed to his chest until the spasm passed. The office called that a staffing issue. I called it a human being in the blast radius of bad decisions. The fog signal relay should have clicked at its interval. It did not. Not a fade, not a dip, a full stop. The silence landed hard enough that I looked up from the desk. Then a thin scraping rose from above, slow and patient, like someone drawing a fingernail across metal 1 inch at a time. The binder said bolt the shutters, so I took the iron key and climbed, counting steps because numbers give the mind a railing. The shutter wheel vibrated under my palm with a tremor that did not match the lamp motor, and a shape moved across the glass in the wrong direction before I got the shutters sealed. Iron groaned. The clank sounded final. The first breach happened because I wanted proof. The rule said bolt the shutters, not that I had to see them seal, but every evaluator I ever had believed in visual confirmation more than judgment, so I slid my headlamp along the seam anyway. A hairline gap showed at the lower corner. My fingertips found the edge, and the metal felt warmer than it should have, like skin under a blanket. That warmth made me lift my eyes. The gap gave me a slice of outside no bigger than a postcard, and the red light made the sea look thick, almost syrupy. Something stood in that syrup at the base of the tower, tall enough that my brain searched for a person and wrong enough that the search failed. The figure turned its head toward the tower, and it moved like a joint had been installed backward. The gap snapped shut on its own with a soft tick, and the whole tower answered with a sound I still feel in my teeth, a deep inhale through wet rock. My radio died, not crackled, not faded, hard like somebody cut the cord inside the world. The second page of the binder sat under a thumb smear that had blurred one word just enough to matter. The line read, "If the beam turns red, do not announce it on the radio. Let the system finish." System. That was office language, the kind they used when they wanted people to stop asking who exactly benefited from patience. I wanted harder proof than a feeling in a dead radio. A strip of paper stuck out from under the binder, freshly printed and still warm. The printer sat against the wall under the monitor, old beige plastic yellowed by years of damp air. One paper tray held shut with gray duct tape, the asset tag on its side scraped down to silver. It always smelled faintly of hot dust, an old toner. Tonight the smell came up sharp enough to sting my throat. The paper looked like a copy of the binder page I had just read, except the blurred word was clean now, the missing letter restored. The line I thought said, "Let the system finish," did not say that at all. It said, "Let the sea finish." My hands went cold. I set the strip down face down. The fresh print included a short table of my logs, copied perfectly from the notes I had filled downstairs, right down to the way I make my capital letters too tall. One line had been added at the bottom, in the same calm office font. Observed exterior during red cycle. I had not written that. My pencil was still tucked behind my ear, where it always sat. My hands had not touched the log again after I climbed. The printer had written a clean lie using my own habits. Two explanations fought for room in my head. One was human and ugly. The office was running some compliance test on the new keeper, feeding false errors to see whether I panicked. The other lived colder. Something in the surf used rules like teeth, and obedience was just how it opened the mouth. I chose the human explanation first because it made me feel less alone. Footsteps came up from below, slow and careful, and a headlamp beam cut across the metal from the stairwell, white and steady. The relief keeper climbed into the service room with the economy of someone who had spent enough winters in this tower to stop wasting movement. He did not look at my face first. He looked at the shutter wheel, then my hands. His knuckles were swollen with old work. Cigarette smoke lived in the coat fibers no detergent ever fully strips out, and the bitter edge of menthol gum rode under it. "Red already," the relief keeper said. "Yeah?" My own voice came out thin. He stepped close enough to see the binder and pointed without touching it. "Shutters in 10 seconds, he said. A small part of me wanted to argue. The office had never mentioned 10 seconds. The binder did not either. But the page under his finger had a depression in it, like somebody before me had pressed there with a nail hard enough to bruise the paper, and that felt like a better credential than any manual. "Floor only," he said. "What happens if—" "Nothing good." He held my eyes for half a beat. Not dramatic, not mystical, just final. "No radio, no window." Then he turned away and started back down the stairs. The beam kept sweeping red behind the shutters. My lungs would not quite fill. Shame sat high in my chest, because the older man had clocked the room in 2 seconds, and I had already given it one bad look and a dead radio. Action keeps panic from spreading. So I grabbed the binder and flipped to the maintenance section. the pages stuck together where salt had dried into the fibers, and I had to peel them apart one careful inch at a time. A small printed header in the top corner read, "Revision approved," followed by initials I did not recognize, and a date blurred by moisture. The language looked official. The page itself looked handled, worried, and old. The note about the stop lever sat there again, and this time I read the full paragraph around it. The lamp housing had been retrofitted 2 administrations ago, the lever bolted on after a storm season that had jammed the rotation twice. The little diagram beside it had almost vanished. Somebody had traced over the arrow once in pencil and then changed their mind. A yellow paint mark on the real housing upstairs would tell you where to grip, if the paint was still there. Mechanical logic felt cleaner than fear. If the sweep was the cycle, then stopping the sweep might starve the cycle. I held on to that the way drowning people hold on to wood. The lamp motor changed pitch above me, just a tiny wobble like an engine catching on something. My headlamp cast my shadow along the wall, and for 1 second the shadow grew an extra arm, a narrow branch that did not belong to my body. "Keep it simple," I whispered and tightened the shutter wheel until my forearm cramped. A low groan rose from below. Not the tower settling, not wind. Something like a throat clearing in the middle of the stairwell. Then came another gap in the world. The hum of the old fridge in the corner cut out. The desk lamp buzz died in the middle of a note. Even the tiny rattle inside the monitor casing stopped. Silence filled the service room so completely I could hear my shirt sleeve move against itself when I breathed. From the stairwell below, the relief keeper called up. Down here, my lungs tried to lock. The rules said no radio, no window, nothing about stairs. Rules love gaps. I moved too fast. My boot skidded on a wet step, and something in my pocket jolted loose. My key ring smacked the railing hard enough to sting my hand. I caught it by reflex, looked down, and saw the shutter wheel key missing from the ring. Access. Loss. The ladder was already building, and it started with one stupid peak. The service room below was dim, lit only by the desk lamp and the weak spill from my headlamp. The relief keeper stood by the outside catwalk door with his shoulders tight. Fear had drained the color out of his face and left it waxy. "The handle's wet," he said. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. He stepped aside. Under the desk lamp, the outside handle shone with brine. A thin line of salt had run down the metal and dried halfway to the floor, then ended in a clean cutoff, like whoever touched it had been lifted away before the drip could finish. The margin of the maintenance page held another line in a tighter hand that dug into the paper. "If the outside handle sweats, do not open. Lock it twice." I reached for the deadbolt and stopped just long enough to notice something my fear had missed. The handwriting in the margin leaned the same way as the initials on the revision note. Same cramped upstroke, same habit of carving the final letter too deep. My fingers turned the bolt anyway. It slid home with a heavy clunk that felt good in the hand. The relief keeper's shoulders lowered for half a breath. Mine did too. Then 3 knocks came from the other side of the door. Not wood settling, not metal shifting. Knuckles, patient, polite. The relief keeper stepped back like the door had burned him. Another knock. The salt line thickened. A new drop ran down and stopped at the same exact cutoff, as if someone outside was measuring. His eyes went to my hands. I saw him fighting the same thing I was. Policy against a human shape, on the other side of a door. Procedure against the oldest reflex in the body. "Keep it simple," I said, mostly to myself, and reached for my phone. There was never signal in the tower. The office called that a feature. The black screen reflected my face back at me under the lamp. For 1 second, the reflection blinked when I did not. Slowly, like somebody savoring a secret. The tower did not need my eyes. It could borrow them. The relief keeper took the binder from the desk and flipped to the front pages without looking down. He moved like a man who had done it in the dark before. He saw the printed strip I had left face down, turned it over, and the muscles in his jaw bunched. "It rewrote again," he said. My stomach sank, and shame hit right behind it because I still hadn't told him about the gap in the shutter seam. "I looked through a gap," I said. "Just a second." He did not yell. He only nodded once, like a doctor hearing a symptom he already suspected. "Second breach gets worse." His voice carried no blame. That made it land harder. The knock came again, and this time the tower's ambient sound vanished with it. The desk lamp quit buzzing. The fridge went dead silent. The damp tick inside the wall pipe disappeared. The quiet pressed into the room until I could hear the cartilage in my own throat when I swallowed. The next decision stood there in the silence and waited for hands. I locked the door again. The second bolt clicked. The knocking stopped immediately, which should have felt like relief, and did not. My performance plan required documented escalation on any anomaly beyond equipment drift. The contract still lived in one corner of my mind, not because I loved the job, but because jobs keep the lights on in ordinary ways. I opened the laptop on the desk and typed a message to my supervisor with deliberate, plain language. Red beam outside normal filter profile. Radio failure, exterior handle wet. Need callback. The cursor blinked once, the line duplicated itself, then duplicated again, then vanished, leaving a clean draft window like I'd never typed at all. I hit print. The old beige printer whirred. The duct-taped tray shivered. A sheet slid out carrying my supervisor's usual subject line in the corner. Signal integrity audit. The message underneath was one sentence. Compliance is safety. Finish the red cycle. No name, no signature, no proof a person had sent it. The relief keeper read it and gave me a look so tired it almost counted as pity. "Office never writes that short," he said. The two explanations I'd been holding started to collapse toward a third, uglier one. A human system could be complicit. A non-human system could learn office language. Either way, the rules were not about keeping me safe. The rules were about keeping the process running. A sound rose from the stairwell, then faint at first, and so distinct once I heard it that my skin went cold. A slow page turn, paper against paper. One sheet lifted and laid down, then another, steady, rhythmic, coming from the steps where no binder lived. The relief keeper froze. "Same as last time," he whispered. That sentence mattered because it meant this had happened before, and because nobody had told me. He put a hand against his chest, then, just for a second, a small private motion that looked automatic and old. He tried to hide it. He did not hide it fast enough. The moral line in me hardened. The office could kill my contract. Fine. I had already watched what happened when I treated a human cost like background noise under procedure. I was not going to do it again in a lighthouse while an older man tried to breathe through somebody else's system. The camera monitor above the desk gave a soft pop of static. A red dot lit at the bottom corner. The feed from the lantern room came alive. The shutters in the image were open. In reality, I had bolted them shut. The monitor showed the lantern room bright, and in that brightness stood a tall silhouette by the glass, head turned toward the tower, arms hanging wrong as if the joints had been built for a different species and then hidden in a coat. The camera exposure pumped around it, light swelling and shrinking like the room itself was breathing. The relief keeper leaned in, then jerked back. "Shutters stayed shut," he said. Comfort and terror arrived together, because either the monitor was lying or the tower had more rooms in it than the floor plan admitted. The point of no return arrived the way it always does, quietly, with one thing changing and refusing to change back. A heavy thud hit the outside door. Not a knock now. Wait. The deadbolt flexed. Salt mist sprayed through the seam and hit my lips. Sharp. Bitter. The relief keeper stumbled back, heel catching the chair leg, and grabbed the desk to steady himself. The desk lamp flickered. The camera froze on the silhouette upstairs. The unplugged silence of the room broke with one new sound. The printer started feeding paper with no command. The relief keeper's hand clamped around my wrist. "Open upstairs," he said. "Not here. Upstairs." He did not explain why. He did not need to. The outside door was a direct invitation. The tower had offered a second path. He ripped a coffee-ringed page free from the binder. The paper tore with a damp sound that made my shoulders tighten. One printed line sat there in blunt office font. "If contact occurs below, open the lantern door once." Once. Nothing good, he had said earlier. Standing in front of that rule, the phrase finally opened. A moral dilemma never announces itself. It just asks the body for emotion. If I obeyed and opened the lantern door, I risked whatever waited outside the glass. If I kept everything sealed, the relief keeper might collapse in this room while something leaned on the lower door until the metal gave. Either choice would become part of a record. The printer was already writing one for me. I had kept a clean record once before. At a gate I should have held. The relief keeper was not a log entry. I chose the human being in front of me. The climb to the lantern room felt longer than the tower allowed on any normal night. The steps under my boots felt slightly soft, like the metal had been wrapped in damp cloth. The relief keeper followed slower, breathing hard enough that every third step came with a hitch. My headlamp cut the stairwell into pieces, and each piece looked a little less like a place I'd climbed 100 times. At the top, the lantern door latch met my fingers, cold and slick. I double-tapped it because the body wants ritual when the mind runs out. The missing shutter key turned my courage into something close to panic. The relief keeper's hand found my shoulder. "Shutters in 10 seconds, he said. Same flat tone, same worn-out certainty, a sentence sanded smooth by repetition. I opened the door. The lantern room smelled like seaweed left too long in sun, wet and sweet and wrong for an enclosed place. The shutters that should have been bolted were already rolled back. The glass wrapped around the tower like an eye with no lid, and the red beam painted the fog and sea in a slow, bruised rotation. I kept my gaze low because the rule was still the rule. But the relief keeper's boot scraped the threshold, and he sucked in a breath so sharply it made me look up for a fraction. That fraction cost me. A face pressed against the glass outside, salt-caked and smooth, where eyes should have been. The mouth smiling with too many small, even teeth, like a zipper half open. The red beam hit that face and made it shine, and in that shine, I recognized the shape of my own expression copied badly. The relief keeper yanked me down by the shoulder. My knees hit metal hard enough to send pain up my legs. "Floor," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. The red beam shifted, not to white but to a duller pink, and the pressure in the air eased a little, like a fist unclenching. Aye. The scraping outside stopped. Even the paper noise below died. For 3 heartbeats, the tower felt like a lighthouse again. Then the real rule arrived. The printer started up anyway, faint through the floor, and my phone lit in my pocket, though there was still no signal. The screen showed a frozen still frame from the desk camera. The lantern room. Me standing upright at the glass, hand raised, looking out like I was greeting somebody. The relief keeper stared at the phone, then at me on the floor. "Record keeps writing," he said. A new line appeared under the fake image while we watched. "Witness confirmed. Cycle completed." His breathing turned wheezy and thin. Fear about blame dropped away from me and made room for something cleaner. I had one real containment option left, and I'd been carrying it in the back of my head since I first read the maintenance page. The lamp housing stood beside us, heavy brass and steel under layers of salt haze. The manual stop lever jutted from the motor casing, a retro fit bar with chipped yellow paint still clinging to one side, an old service number half-eaten by rust along the base plate. Somebody had wrapped the grip once with friction tape. The tape had long since dried and peeled, leaving black scales stuck to the metal like dead skin. Every training sheet said not to use it, unless the light itself became the hazard. Freezing the beam meant risking anything out there depending on it. The office phrase for that was willful interference with navigational aid. The little key box beside the lever hung open, empty. A wet thumbprint in salt marked the inside of the lid, and the thumbprint had 6 smears under it, like it kept trying to become a hand and never quite remembered how. My safe space was shrinking in real time. The relief keeper's knees hit the floor beside me. His grip on the lamp housing shook. Outside the glass, something made a sound that should not have been possible. My own voice. From the far side of the lantern room, low and patient, saying the words I used to hold myself together. "Keep it simple." The relief keeper flinched like he had been slapped. The dread in my chest changed shape then, because the threat was not just outside the glass anymore. It had learned the language I used to stay functional. At the bottom of the emergency page, written in cleaner paper than the rest, as if added after a spill and never fully absorbed into the document, one line weighted in a different ink. If the printer issues a clean page during read, destroy it. Keep the dirty copy. Destroying evidence felt wrong. Keeping a clean lie felt worse. I went downstairs 2 steps at a time, the relief keeper behind me slower and coughing. The service room stank of hot plastic. Another sheet had already slid from the printer and lay on the floor like something shed. I tore the fresh printouts into strips and dropped them into the small waste can under the desk. The relief keeper fished a spare wick lighter from the drawer without a word. I lit the paper. The toner curled dark and bitter. Chemical smoke rose hard enough to sting my eyes. The smoke alarm should have chirped. It did not. Instead, the room fell into a third pocket of silence, broader and uglier than the others. No surf outside. No pipe tick in the wall. No distant gull. The whole sea seemed to stop moving so it could listen. The relief keeper grabbed my sleeve and pointed at the shutter wheel plate resting on the desk, where I had set it down earlier. L6. Salt had crusted around the letters. In that crust, somebody had traced a small spiral with a fingertip, tight as the stairwell, ending right at the stamp like an arrow. My brain finally caught up. The missing key, the revised pages, the fake images, the 6 smeared print in the key box. All of it leaned toward that little mark like filings toward a magnet. The trap rule sat on a page I had not reached yet, and the relief keeper had never said it out loud. I realized why before I found it. Some instructions are safer unwritten in the mouth. My fingers flipped anyway because fear is just curiosity with a pulse problem. The trap rule sat there in calm office font, almost helpful in the way bad orders often are. To end red cycle, open shutters, and confirm horizon line. Under it, in the same tight hand as the earlier warning, smeared as if somebody had dragged a wet thumb across the ink while trying to erase it, were 3 words. Do not confirm. Cold stupidity moved through me all at once. I had already confirmed by accident when I looked through the gap. The tower had written that moment into its version of the record and then kept asking for it again. Office made that, the relief keeper said. His voice held the first real anger I'd heard from him. Another page slid from the printer so softly it sounded polite. Under the usual subject line sat a fresh sentence. L6 is active. My key ring felt heavier at my belt. Shame rose hot and useless because that stamp had been in front of me from the beginning and I had filed it under background. The relief keeper caught my wrist. Leave warning, he said. No more proving. A small part of me wanted to run. The tower had already shown me what running would mean. If I left without sealing any of this in a form the next keeper might trust, the whole thing would just restart with somebody less ready and more willing to believe a clean printout. I moved like a trained man again, not brave, just narrowed down to function. The record was the mechanism. The printer, the fake images, the revised pages, the monitor feed, the office language. Evidence was how it controlled the room. So I tried to make a different kind of record. The laptop still held the blank draft from earlier. I saved a local file and typed fast, plain, measurable details, red beam outside normal filter profile, radio loss at first breach, false log entry, wet handle, camera contradiction, veteran rule, shutters in 10 seconds. I kept it ugly and factual because that kind of writing survives panic better than reflection. The text stayed on screen long enough for my pulse to slow. Then the lines changed in front of me. Observed exterior during red cycle, witness confirmed cycle completed. The words replaced my own while I watched, calm and confident, like a supervisor correcting a trainee. I yanked the printer cord from the wall. It came free too easily. The plug was dry and clean, like it had never really been seated. The printer word anyway. A fresh sheet slid out with no power and no hesitation. It carried one line printed so dark the letters looked wet. The light is not yours. The relief keeper's breath hitched. His eyes went unfocused for half a second, as if something in the room had tugged on his attention from behind. The stop lever was the last move I had. The housing had the heavy steel bar, mounted to the motor casing. Same one the binder mentioned on page 1. Same one somebody decades ago had decided was worth adding after the ordinary failure modes stopped being ordinary. If I pulled it, ships might miss the beam. My evaluator would call that unforgivable. The office would call it interference. The printer would probably find a better word than either one. The relief keeper's hand slid down my arm, weaker now. "Stop it," he said. His voice had gone raw. "Stop the sweep." I pulled the lever. The motor screamed once, a short metal animal sound, and the red beam froze mid-rotation like a finger caught in a closing door. The tower shuddered. For one strange second, the whole world felt off balance because the ocean expects the light to move. Relief hit sharp and real. The scraping outside cut off. The wet breath sound by the glass died. The silence in the room relaxed into normal sound again. Somewhere below us, the fridge rattled back to life. Distant surf returned, thin but present. Then the tower charged me. A white flare burst across the glass, even with the shutters shut, bright enough to stab behind my eyes. Red spots bloomed in my vision, pulsing with my heartbeat. They did not fade when I blinked. The relief keeper grabbed my shoulder. "No more light," he said. My vision did not go black. That would have been simple. It went red. Everything in the room took on the color of the beam. Not tinted, not shaded, but replaced, as if the tower had swapped my sight for its own filter. The relief keeper's face became a red blur, with dark hollows where the eyes should have been. The brass housing turned into a red shape with a wet red shine. I understood then that the tower had found a way to keep me witnessing even when I refused. Permanent costs arrive quietly. They just stay. The relief keeper coughed hard enough to fold over. He sank against the wall, leaving a white salt smear on the paint where his shoulder dragged. Guilt hit me hard and clean, the useful kind that forces motion. I dragged him down the stairs. The descent took longer than it should have. My foot found extra steps that had not been there on the way up. The railing felt rougher, like barnacle grit had grown out of the metal in the last minute. The service room below smelled like smoke, sea, and hot dust from the old printer that would not admit it was dead. The outside handle gleamed wet again. I hated the tower then with a focus that felt almost peaceful. It had built the whole chain to force the same choice twice. The light or the body, the record or the person, policy or the man trying to breathe. I didn't choose the light. The back of the binder held a tear-out emergency note for the next shift. Thick, yellowed paper waiting under a plastic flap, gone cloudy with age. The same L6 stamp sat in the corner, half hidden by damp warping. The desk lamp beside it had its cord wrapped in black electrical tape 3 separate times. Everything else in the room had failed at least once that night. The lamp kept burning. I wrote in block letters because cursive is easy to alter. When the beam turns red, do not look outside. If contact happens below, open the lantern door once. Do not confirm the horizon line. The record will lie to force confirmation. I added the veteran rule too because the measurable truths felt more likely to survive. Shutters in 10 seconds. Eyes to the floor. Then I slid the note into the plastic sleeve and taped it to the lamp stem. A final sheet slid from the unplugged printer and settled on the floor face up. Next witness arrives at sunrise. The relief keeper's eyelids fluttered. For a second I thought he saw me, the real version of me under all the red. And the hope of that almost broke me more than the fear had. "Boat," he rasped. The dock was the only way off the rock. The dock required outside. Outside was what the trap kept asking for in different voices. The tower had built the moral chain reaction perfectly. Save the relief keeper, break the rule, create the record, pay the cost, then face the last choice anyway. I chose the only version of responsibility I had left. I re-triggered the red cycle. The stop lever had a reset notch. I shoved it back into motion even though the beam in my eyes made my skull throb. The motor caught. The red sweep started again. The tower gave a low, satisfied shiver through the floor plates that I felt up my legs. The relief keeper managed a weak nod. I opened the outside door, not wide, not like defiance. Just enough to throw the emergency rope line out onto the catwalk and drag him with something stronger than my grip. Cold sea air slapped my face full of brine. My eyes stayed down on the metal grate. The red beam washed across my hands, warm as breath. A wet weight moved past the opening, close enough to change the air pressure in the room. Something outside spoke in my voice again, low and patient. Keep it simple. The relief keeper's fingers found the rope. I hauled. The line burned my palms. That pain anchored me to the fact of my own body. He slid over the threshold inch by inch, boots scraping, and the outside air seemed to pull at him like a tide wanting its turn. I kept pulling until his hips cleared the doorway, then kicked the door shut and locked it twice. Because some rules stay true even when you learn why they were written. The red beam swept across the service room window. The glass glowed. A shadow passed over it, tall and smooth, and stopped on the other side of the wall as if listening for the record being made. The laptop screen flickered. A folder path I had never seen before appeared there, nested under names I did not recognize. My warning file copied into it and renamed in clean office language. Beside it sat other files bearing the same subject phrase from the fake memo. Signal integrity audit, signal integrity audit, signal integrity audit, lined up like trophies. The relief keeper coughed once and whispered, "System already knew." After that, the rest happened in the ugly, practical way emergencies do. I kept him upright. I kept his airway open. I kept my eyes off the horizon when the boat reached the dock, even though every survival reflex wanted to check where I was. Dawn came up pale over Cable Bay, and the red in my sight did not lift with it. The relief keeper survived the ride because I kept talking to him and because some damage waits a little while before it takes what it came for. He was still breathing when the paramedics took him on the pier. The office called later for my logs. Their voices were calm, professional. They asked for times and entries and whether all station equipment remained within normal parameters. I told them the printer never worked right. The lie tasted bitter, but it was the only kind I knew how to make anymore, the kind that keeps something shut instead of opening it. I went back once to pack my gear. The tower was gray in daylight, ordinary from the outside, in the insulting way dangerous places often are after they finish with you. Inside, the service room smelled like damp paper and coal dust. The warning note was still taped to the lamp. My handwriting looked more desperate in daylight than it had in the dark. Under the peeling front sticker on the binder, next to the faint old L6 mark, somebody had added a second stamp. Same ink family, same pressure, fresher, different letter. The trap was not just in this lighthouse. It was a template. Now, months later, the red still lives in my vision. Brake lights and traffic make my throat close. Exit signs on hotel hallways pull my eyes down before I can stop myself. Sometimes a sunset in the wrong window will put salt in my mouth, so suddenly I have to sit down. And somewhere, the next keeper is reading that binder for the first time, filing away the note about the stop lever and thinking it won't come to that. Eyes to the floor.